4th of July 2009, Urumqi in China, 400 kilometers west of Beijing. The police violently and bloodily repress a demonstration. 2 men, armed with machetes, are shot in front of everyone. They were revolting against the Chinese authorities. They were part of an ethnic minority, the Uyghur. In their region, Xinjiang, the Uyghur currently account for only half the population. Like their Tibetan neighbors, they feel oppressed. That summer of 2009, hatred and savagery prevailed in China's far west. Faced with police repression, the Uyghurs responded with an outburst of incredible violence. They attacked the Chinese. Everything happened under the gaze of the CCTV cameras, but also that of the terrified locals. The authorities' response was brutal. The next day, security forces entered the districts in which Uyghurs and Chinese lived together. The Chinese no longer hesitated to denounce their Uyghur neighbors. The army had to act quickly. The Uyghurs were on the point of being lynched by the Chinese residents. Hatred between the two races was deeply entrenched. Officially, these riots caused the death of nearly 200 people in Xinjiang. Uyghurs were arrested. Several hundred are still to be tried or returned to their families. Xinjiang is this Chinese province in the far west of the country. It's the regime's main headache, because just like Tibet, it's on the verge of implosion. Mao annexed this region 50 years ago. The Uyghur, Muslims of Turkish origin, are in the majority and don't feel Chinese. Today they number 8 million. Beijing has granted them fake autonomy. Officially, a Uyghur governs the province, but he remains under the regime's orders. Over the last 2 years, anti-Chinese attacks have increased, leaving dozens of people dead and hundreds wounded. The Uyghur want their independence. In response, Beijing has deployed its armed forces and sent in millions of Chinese settlers. They get the best land and the best jobs. Keeping hold of Xinjiang is almost essential for China. This region is the largest in the country. It holds a strategic position, opening the way to Central Asia and Europe. But more than that, its subsoil is overflowing with riches. It's here that the country's largest reserves of oil, gas and coal are to be found. Billions of euros are at stake. That's why Xinjiang is the most militarized province in China. It's estimated that 1 in 3 Chinese here work for the security forces, a reality that must be hidden from the eyes of the world. The regime is also playing the national tourism card. Here we are in Urumqi. It's hard to get into Xinjiang. Western journalists aren't welcome. After months of fruitless efforts, it's under a false identity that we finally join the official convoy of a Chinese tour operator. It's a unique opportunity to experience the communications strategy developed by Beijing to prove that all is well beneath the skies of Xinjiang. As far as the authorities are concerned, we're keeping a blog. After negotiation, we're given permission to film whatever we like. Thanks to this official convoy, we'll be able to explore the whole province. We shall be fed PR by the Chinese regime and learn a fine lesson in propaganda. As on any good organized tour, we're entitled to a guide.
Yeah, Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. So that Uyghur is talking about who I am. I am Uyghur. So one of the main ethnic group. And only because of the Uyghur people in China, mostly located in Xinjiang. And that's why we have our special territory with a special political system and special living area, and also all these special customs and history and everything different. Now after 2009, whatever happened in Urumqi probably swiped up all these records in the world, let most of the people in the world know about us. Every bad thing or a good thing have both sides. Always bring either bad or good at the same time. So this is also your opportunity to find out.
Xinjiang is a vast territory, 3 times the size of France. We've hours and hours of driving ahead of us. But hardly have we left the regional capital than the convoy stops in the middle of the desert. Bizarrely, the coach drivers start to hide the license plates of their vehicles. It seems we're the only ones to be surprised.
We got the permission, so we can drive fastly. So because and on the way to Buddhist caves, there are so many limited speeds and route, and so many cameras. So we just avoid the cameras. We can drive faster on the road.
It is indeed much more practical. No need to stop at the tolls or even to pay. Our convoy is too important for that. We're also entitled to a police escort and a private ambulance. And so it's hardly surprising to be saluted by a policeman in the middle of nowhere. And when the travelers ask to stop for a pee break, it's quite natural that the traffic is halted in both directions. Every whim is indulged. The members of this trip are super VIPs. They have to be convinced that Xinjiang is safe and that Chinese tourists can return here. Beijing wants to recoup its investments in the region. Over the last 5 years, more than €1 billion have been injected into the local tourism infrastructures. They just need to ensure that the Uyghur have finally accepted their status as a folk attraction. Not everything is quite up to the mark. The Uyghur dancer's joy lacks a little spontaneity. According to the itinerary, everyone was meant to dance together to get a taste of Uyghur culture. But time is running out. The guides are anxious. It's time to leave and move on to the next activity. Another, even more grandiose spectacle awaits us. The Ministry of Tourism has spared no expense. On stage, group follows group at a frantic pace, performing their finest dances to general indifference. The travelers are only interested in one thing: eating and drinking. Although they're on Muslim soil, the alcohol flows freely. Respect for local traditions doesn't concern them. In this Xinjiang, folklorized by Beijing, the balance of power has clearly shifted towards the Chinese. The Uyghur have to put on a good show in front of their new masters. How much longer will they tolerate it? Over 10 years, the Chinese have shaped the region in their own image. New cities have risen up from the ground. There's nothing local about the architecture here. It's not surprising. These buildings were made to house Chinese settlers. They all work for a paramilitary organization. It's called the Bingtuan, and it controls the whole region. It's unique in China. The army is authorized to do business, mainly in agriculture. In Xinjiang, 1 out of 3 Chinese belong to this Bingtuan. That's nearly 3 million people. Beijing couldn't have found anything better than these farmer soldiers to monitor the Uyghur.
Until to 1930, the real liberation started. Thousands of army soldiers came to Xinjiang, all the cities, everywhere, and helping to get rid of all of those problems, and we have settled down as one country and one policy, one law. So what we're gonna do with all these soldiers, the same project started again. Why don't you drop your weapon? Become what we did before, protect our homeland near the border. So all of those army soldiers start to change it into farmers. But they have a second order. Anytime the country needs you, you have to take your weapon and drop your farming stools. Become an army soldier again. We had huge groups of Bingtuans, the army soldiers, and what they grow is cotton. And they sell the textiles, the cotton fabrics to Gucci, LV, Prada, Chanel. I'm sure you know these products, but you probably don't know the material where it's from. It's from Xinjiang. Exactly. The army land in Aksu, in Kashgar. So after we get off the car, follow my flag.
But the soldiers don't just act as farmers. On occasion, they also become perfect tour guides. The army has thought of everything. It's even provided some of its trucks.
Number 2. This is number 2.
Yes. Okay, please count for me, please.
They're obviously a bit short on comfort. But that's what gives the excursion its charm. You don't often get to take a relaxed drive with a bunch of Chinese soldiers.
Before us, you can see the Yangtze landform and the rock salt landform.
This is an exclusive visit. This canyon is in a military zone. The army has just opened it to tourists. After cotton, the soldiers hope to make some resounding profits from it. Today, the stakes are high. They have to convince their visitors that the site's worth seeing. The tour operators will then include it in their itineraries.
来，美女用喇叭喊一下，注意一下脚底下，喊一下我声音不够大。
张枇杷柴玉又名红纱，秋天的时候是最漂亮的，可以做盆景的。现在都已经开败了，不过走的时候要小心，上面有刺的。对这个。这条是一共有。
Throughout the ramble, the soldiers bend over backwards to entertain the tourists.
Now I see it.
It's a total success. The group starts to relax.
Oh, baby. Oh, move your body there.
Perhaps a bit too much for the soldiers. Discipline is soon restored. It's back to civilian life in our bus.
Welcome to Kashgar. So we're gonna go to the Sunday market directly. We have 1 hour in the bazaar. But today we are a big group, maybe it's gonna take a little long time to get the people back. So we're gonna work together. Maybe I or someone gonna lead us. So we're gonna visit the bazaar together.
Kashgar, the largest and oldest Uyghur city. Unlike Urumqi, which was created by the Chinese, Kashgar is the heart of Uyghur culture. The ancient city continues to live, like its distant cousin Istanbul, at the pace of a Muslim East. UNESCO has tried to make its historic center a World Heritage Site, but China is against it.
This is the old city wall.
Is it renew or from the time?
Renew.
Okay.
But this is the old area, old place.
Okay.
For a so-called ancient city, the houses seem very new to us. Some of the walls aren't even finished.
It's just for tourists.
What do the Uyghurs think of this?
They're happy because they have a new apartment before everyone else.
A brand new home.
Stop answering them. We have to move on faster.
I have to answer their questions.
Our questions start to make the guides uneasy, but we're not the only ones in the group to have noticed that none of this decor rings true. One of the few Europeans on the trip, a German who knows the region well, is also surprised.
Il y avait tant de travailleurs, c'était un quartier normalement que vous trouvez dans l'Antiquité, mais maintenant c'est purifié.
C'est vrai.
10 ans.
Ça ressemble
It's a bit like a film set.
Oui, ça c'est Disneyland. Il faut demander ça aux Uyghurs, mais eux ne peuvent pas parler de ça. C'est défendu pour eux. Ils ont même interdit, c'est ça.
There are many forbidden things here.
Follow her.
In any case, what isn't forbidden is going inside the Uyghurs' houses. There's no need to ask permission. It's allowed by the Kashgar tourist office. Obviously, when 20 people turn up unexpectedly, it can catch the occupants by surprise.
Yes, still living here. This is actually a 6th floor. You can see from there.
These people really live in this house. They're not extras paid to entertain the tourists. Amazingly, no one objects to being filmed or photographed, even doing the most private things. The Uyghur behave as though we weren't there.
Cheese.
We soon realize that they have no choice, like this Uyghur worker during his lunch break.
It's also traditional head. Sorry.
The visitors' laughter rings through the peaceful old town under construction. It's all so calm. Even the Kashgar mosque seems to be sleeping. It's hard to imagine that a few months ago, thousands of angry Uyghur were demonstrating here against the Chinese occupation. During our visit, we don't see a single policeman around the mosque. Apparently, that's no coincidence.
Normalement, dans la ville, autour de la mosquée, il y a toujours de la police. Aujourd'hui, il n'y en a pas, parce que nous sommes un groupe international. Ils ont faire une bonne mine pour faire de la publicité pour le tourisme et naturellement pour faire la publicité pour les voyageurs qui viennent ici à Kashgar. Mais normalement, ils ont peur de la population qui habite ici, que vivre leur vie individuelle, leur vie religieuse, qui est totalement différente du système politique officiel qu'on a à 4000 km d'ici.
For 10 days, the Chinese Communist regime has shown us its vision of Xinjiang. For 10 days, we've received no information about what's going on in the rest of the province. While we were playing the tourist along with the military, just a few hundred kilometers away, more demonstrations were turning to carnage. These images were shot in Urumqi, the regional capital of Xinjiang, the day we were visiting the mosque in Kashgar. Urumqi was almost under siege, and we knew nothing about it. More Uyghur riots had just taken place. The outcome? 27 dead, including 9 police officers. This demonstration of military force had one objective: to reassure the Chinese population. In view of these images, how could we form an opinion of the real situation in the region? There was only one way: to come back. A few months have gone by. We've returned to Kashgar. Today the city is patrolled by the army. Uyghurs are routinely checked by the police. It's their phones they're interested in. An anti-Chinese video or message means prison. This time, we've come in on simple tourist visas. And we're alone. With our small cameras, we're going to slip into the crowd and discover another face of this Chinese region, far from the propaganda. We've met a Uyghur man here. He testifies to this police pressure.
And here the security are a little bit tightened, you know, there are checkpoints around, and especially in the evenings, you know. It's been like this already for several years. You know, we have police like that since 2009, July 5th, you know, time to time, you know, checkpoints. And we used to see them all around, so we already accept that as a part of our life.
During these checks and demonstrations, many Uyghurs have been arrested. Some have never been tried or returned to their families. They've disappeared. The family of one of those missing agreed to meet us. We enter the old part of Kashgar. For added security, we conduct our interview while driving through the traffic.
They oppress us, the citizens.
They've crushed us without mercy.
The government has to tell us if my son is dead. We can't bear not knowing. We're so small and they're so powerful. But I want to know if my son has been executed.
Aren't you under pressure to abandon your efforts? Of course. They want to frighten us. They watch us. They threaten us. They stop us leaving our village so that we don't make a fuss.
Oh, they cannot move.
Every day, there are 2 or 3 police cars outside my house.
Isn't it dangerous to speak to a foreigner?
We're no longer afraid. They can kill us, tie us to a tree and burn us.
How many Uyghur have gone missing like this since the riots in 2009? The opponents speak of 100. What's certain is, each year, dozens of Uyghur are officially sentenced to death for terrorism or separatism. The old city. Like all good tourists, we have to pay it a visit. And like everyone else, we pay to enter these districts, turned into a living museum. But here again, we're in for some surprises.
That means good family.
Civilized family, this one is. It's like you accepted good education, you are civilized. This one is clean.
There are lots of plaques. There isn't just civilized, there's clean too. Who gives these out?
It's the government.
The government doesn't just award points, it's also rebuilding. But before that, there's demolition to be done. Over the last few years, the old Uyghur buildings have been torn down.
That's all?
Yes.
Wow, it's a shame. That's all old. That's all old. It's pretty. Aren't the Uyghurs sad to see this?
Sad, but it's like that.
In place of the mud houses, fine brick dwellings are being built. But the workers aren't Uyghur.
The company is Chinese, and then they will find their own people. They will give this project to the Chinoise company. In the government offices, all of them are Chinese. First they will choose them, and then...
But officially the governor is a Uyghur.
But he's nothing. He's a doll, puppet.
If China is building new, safer, more comfortable homes, it's surely for the good of all, including the Uyghur. It's written on the walls everywhere, in big letters. The slogans are even translated into Uyghur. You can't miss them. They're in the Arabic alphabet. As for the posters plastered everywhere, if they're not written in Chinese, it's because, for the government, they only relate to the Uyghur.
You can't keep any kind of videos or MP3 music thing which is against the Chinese Communist Party or which is related to the terrorism, all kind of things.
Religion is under close surveillance. The local mosques get their share of the little plaques given out by the authorities. And to reach those who can't read or children, little drawings remind Muslims of the rules.
You cannot see the movies, which is illegal.
You mean?
Or you didn't get any permission from the government. You cannot do that in the family like that. And you cannot put any loudspeaker in the mosques or in religious places.
The old Uyghur district is the focus of government surveillance. But is it the same everywhere? We return to the Grand Bazaar, the one we visited at breakneck speed with the official tour group. Upon entering, we notice a difference. A metallic voice floods the aisles of the market. Loudspeakers installed everywhere relay the same information, over and over, and only in Uyghur. The loudspeakers aren't just in the bazaar. Vans broadcast these informative messages in all the Uyghur districts. They're everywhere. With the volume up high, the sound system connected to the battery blasts out endless messages. The same orders are repeated every day in a continuous loop and only stop at nightfall. They're even outside the great mosque in Kashgar. On Fridays, the holy day, Uyghurs flock to hear the sermon. A sermon approved beforehand by the regime. As we hear from this man, a former member of the Islamic Association of China, now a refugee somewhere in Europe.
Every Friday before prayer, the imams receive 3 hours of political study from representatives of the Propaganda Bureau. The imams are obliged to follow the recommendations published by the Islamic Association of China. They also learn the latest local directives, and they are reminded what is forbidden to say. In particular, passages on jihad.
Jihad might give Uyghurs bad ideas. What's more, the whole of Islam is forbidden to those under 18 and members of the Communist Party. To make sure that they don't come to prayer, every entrance is monitored. This child and his father are turned away. They've been spotted by the security services. Here, they're Uyghurs paid by the government. They're easy to recognize. They're the only ones remaining outside. We're not allowed in either. China doesn't like to show the crowds in the mosques.
Can we ask him if we can go inside afterwards? We can't. I'm going to try.
Can they go inside to film?
Do I need to answer?
They just want to take photos.
No, you know it's not possible. They'll have to wait until prayers are over. Understand?
Yes, I understand. We have to wait outside.
Wait outside. It's not possible to go inside. I won't let you in.
Not even by the door?
No. Despite Chinese pressure, Uyghurs have come in large numbers. The mosque isn't big enough to hold them all. In their hundreds, they have to pray outside. Islam still plays an important role in the local culture. Beijing realized this and decided to retranslate the Quran to justify its colonization policy. We met a Uyghur imam. Because he refused to follow the party line, he had to secretly flee China and take refuge in Europe.
The Chinese authorities have changed the Quranic surahs to make them compatible with communist principles. In their eyes, our religion must justify their policy. To do this, the Chinese authorities haven't hesitated to change the translation of the Holy Book.
Only the edition of the Quran approved by Beijing is allowed in China. As for the imam, if he doesn't comply with Communist Party rules, he immediately loses his job, has to pay back 5 years' wages, and ends up in prison. Just a few hundred meters from the mosque, it's another world. that of the Han community, the main ethnic group in China. This time, the police are deliberately visible to reassure the population. Within a decade, nearly 100,000 Han settlers have moved to Kashgar. They're still in the minority, but their lifestyle is imposed on everyone.
Let's say the beauty project or whatever, they just getting started like that for almost 1 year now, I can say. So then some ladies are not allowed to be veiled on the street. They want the ladies open the face up, so the people who has a long beard shave it off, something like that.
Because for them it's not beauty for...
I say, with that, explain that, but they never say this is, I don't, it's how to say.
Only old men are allowed to wear a beard. The Uyghurs feel they're victims of the beauty project. The Chinese authorities have just invented the first apartheid based on aesthetic and religious criteria. But all of this is done with one purpose: to observe the precepts of Mao and the party for the greater good. For those in any doubt, there's no shortage of reminders in favor of the regime. Pierre Rigoulot is a researcher specializing in communist regimes. He knows exactly how to decipher these propaganda posters.
Good propaganda isn't simply the threat. It's also an attempt to attract young people in particular, but not exclusively, to attract individuals. It gives individuals an ideal. Of course, it's presented in a very simple way. It isn't very subtle. It's a call to passion, a call to enthusiasm. It takes both, I think, for it to work. Both the threat and, at the same time, an attempt to arouse enthusiasm. There's an art to writing slogans, and with all these communist states for years and years, I think that intellectuals were brought in to write slogans that were effective for the party. The importance of these posters and their number is a way of saying that the party is everywhere. Obviously, it's a reminder that Big Brother is amongst us and everything is under control. It's the same techniques as those used during the Cultural Revolution and before. In the time of a Stalinian China, which recopied, was inspired by Stalin's Soviet Union. It also makes one think, of course, of North Korea, with a certain number of simple, if not to say simplistic, methods. I hesitate to say brainwashing because it's not so much washing it as inserting other letters, other beliefs, installing other software.
To get a better idea of the way this propaganda is created, we've come to this village, 100 kilometers south of Kashgar, a village renowned for its painters. It's these artists the regime has enrolled to put its propaganda into pictures. All of these frescoes were done by one artist. When the order was completed, he was rewarded with a brand new house. This village is brand new. A few months ago, there was nothing but fields here. It was built from scratch to house the best local painters. Their talent is recognized throughout the whole of Xinjiang, a talent immediately collected and brought together in a museum devoted to Uyghur art, at least that approved by the regime. The director of this museum isn't used to receiving foreign tourists. She's keen to show us the best works in person. This one, the artist simply entitled The Happy Years.
This painting symbolizes the happiness of having been guided by all the Chinese presidents. Thanks to our current leader, Xi Jinping, we have received a great deal of wealth. We have cars, houses. The Uyghurs are so happy that they want to stop the clock so that this happy time goes on forever.
All of these paintings deliver Beijing's messages wonderfully. This one deals with corruption of the everyday kind.
Doesn't the artist risk prison for painting this?
Before, if it was before new president, yes. Now, because he's against new president against this, so it's good.
Possible.
By involving the Uyghur in producing state propaganda, the Chinese regime makes them accomplices. It's an old technique which has already proved useful to authoritarian regimes.
Within the party, or communist parties, it was always like that. There's one that's floating and a few real opponents, so they hit the opponents, but it's the one who's floating who's charged with bringing down the real adversaries. Not me. Yes, that way you show your loyalty to the party.
Both victims and propagators of this propaganda, the Uyghur can't escape it. It even follows them into the fields, in open countryside. It reminds them that Beijing isn't far away. Any stranger inevitably becomes suspect. This fear is natural. The Uyghur farmers are particularly monitored by the regime. Hassan, now a refugee in the United States, endured this pressure for more than 20 years.
They also have a brainwashing propaganda. That propaganda is everyone have to attend the political study. In Chinese propaganda, they say it's political study. And in the political study, you have to stay over there for each week in the Wednesday and Friday afternoon. Each day is 4-hour afternoon, and we have to go over there and get training. That training is some party boss to come to us and give us about the Chinese government's propaganda idea. And after a month, we have to write a report about what we were thinking after this study. We have to show our loyalty in our written statement to the political party and to the Chinese government. And this is, sometimes it's very painful because you have to, in your written statement, you have to accuse so-called Uyghur separatist idea, Uyghurs independence movement, and show your loyalty. That's very painful sometimes.
This propaganda also affects the Han, but for other motives. The state wants to convince them to move to Xinjiang. They get the best land in the region. These fields were allocated to farmers from Henan, a province 3,000 kilometers to the east. They arrived here just 1 year ago.
You came here because the land is good?
Yes, it's very good here.
Will you go back to Henan afterwards?
I'll go back when I can't work anymore.
Do you work with a Uyghur?
There aren't any Uyghur here. Here it's mainly Han.
There are a few Uyghur around though, like this young farmer. Our guide translates for us.
You work for the Chinese?
Do the Chinese pay well? How much do they pay you?
Per day, 200.
The interpreter is lying to us.
So they're good bosses, everything's fine.
He doesn't even translate our last question, but answers for him. Fear drives him to self-censor. Chinese propaganda is demonstrating its terrible efficiency. Yet there are no surveillance cameras in this field, not a policeman to be seen, just us and the farmers, telling us nothing more than why they live here. However, our guide continues to lie.
How many Han are there here?
He said not so much.
The interpreter recites his lessons well. Above all, don't let strangers know that the Han are colonizing the region. But that's what's happening. If these poor farmers left their far-off Henan, it's because the authorities pushed them to do so.
You came from Henan because the land is good, because there's work.
We came here because the soil back home has been destroyed by pollution. Also, in Henan, the state only gives each family 1 hectare of land.
Over there, it's too little to live on. Here in Xinjiang, we are given a lot more. Here there's a lot of work. We can finally earn enough money for the whole family, us and my husband's parents.
Beijing can be proud. The authorities have succeeded in attracting thousands of migrants to Xinjiang, and this is only the beginning. On the way back, just before we arrive in Kashgar, we drive past the state's strike force, a building site stretching for miles on end. All of these buildings have been financed by the city of Canton, at the other end of China. They will soon be inhabited by thousands of Cantonese, coming to profit from the Uyghur bonanza.
How many Cantonese will be coming here?
I don't know. It depends of government. About 50,000. The government always urges the Cantonese to come. But the Uyghur attempts let Cantonese reflect. They think that it's dangerous now. For them, the Uyghur are terrorists. There is much money to be made in Xinjiang.
Two worlds, two lots of propaganda. One winner, the Chinese regime. As with all the other minorities in the country, Uyghur culture is vanishing. All regional particularism must be erased. These ancient descendants of the Silk Road merchants have the defect of not being Han.
I wasn't conscious of Chinese colonization. I grew up amongst them and thought that the party had liberated us and was only there to help us. But it was brainwashing. We were only good for following orders. It was only after the riots in July 2009 that I understood that we weren't Chinese in our own right. I was a teacher at the time. The headmaster of the school called all the Uyghur teachers together. He said, "You Uyghur, you're nothing but mosquitoes. Never forget that we can break you with just one hand."
The former teacher is now a refugee in Europe. She dares to speak openly. With hindsight, it's clearer to her now why the state ordered her to speak to her students in Chinese and never in Uyghur.
There are many things that I regret. Over all those years, I taught close to 1,000 young Uyghurs, and I didn't teach them anything about our culture or about our past. They don't know that we have a flag and that we once had our own country. I only taught them Chinese history.
For years, the Uyghur have peacefully tolerated the colonization of their region. But the situation has become untenable. In 1949, when Mao took power, the Chinese represented only 6% of the population of the province. They're now verging on the majority. The riots of 2009 changed everything. Xinjiang is at boiling point. Attacks against the Chinese are increasing. Today, Kashgar is almost like a city under siege. But not even this police omnipresence instills fear anymore.
Is it getting worse and worse?
For me, it looks like always the same. If there is an accident happens somewhere, more police. But usually it's few there, 2 or 3 or 4 over there, like that, you know.
Historically, the people of Xinjiang practice a moderate and tolerant form of Islam. However, over the last few months, Uyghur Islamist movements have claimed responsibility for bombings. Hundreds of people have died. These actions vindicate China, which can in turn present itself as a victim of terrorism. In the name of public safety, Beijing now has free rein to settle the Uyghur issue. The pressure on the population is constant. Uyghurs are fleeing the country, taking refuge in Europe and the United States. Those who stay are faced with 2 options: revolt or assimilation. Like the old city of Kashgar, the Uyghur are in danger of vanishing.